The fires in Harrenhal burned low, casting long shadows on walls that would never truly warm, not even in summer. Arya Stark pressed herself deeper into the crook behind the great fireplace in the kitchens, watching the flickering light play across the faces of the cooks as they worked and bickered and grumbled about the Lannister soldiers who'd commandeered half their food. She had learned to blend into the stones, a ghost among the embers, listening to everything, forgetting nothing. Each day she told herself she was no one, but the truth clung to her like soot. She was Arya of Winterfell, and the men who ruled these halls were her enemies. They called her Nan, the scullion girl with dirty knees, and a tongue she kept wisely behind her teeth. She scrubbed pots and hauled buckets and fetched for Wheeze, who hit her for looking at him, and for Chiswick, who pinched her hard enough to leave bruises. She was nothing, less than nothing, invisible as air, and that was how she survived. Yet every night, when she lay curled on the hard floor of the tower room she shared with other servants, she whispered her list, naming them all. Tywin, Pain, the Hound, Polliver, Raff the Sweetling, the Mountain. But something was changing. She could feel it, like a storm building beyond the horizon. Unseen but certain, the Knights of the Lion moved restlessly these past weeks, their laughter forced, their voices quick and sharp. Men spoke of the Riverlords rising, of Robb Stark's victories, of Jaime Lannister in chains and Stannis landing at Storm's End. She saw the worry in the cooks' faces, in the furrowed brow of Lord Tywin himself, as he stalked the halls, surrounded by his blood-red guards. One morning, as Arya brought a tray of fresh bread and boiled eggs to the hall, where Tywin took his breakfast, she found herself alone, just for a heartbeat, with the Lord of Casterly Rock. He sat at the head of a long, scarred table, reading a letter. He did not look up as she approached. For a moment she stood frozen. There he was, the man who ruled the armies that had burned Winterfell and slaughtered her kin. She felt the urge to strike, to leap across the table with a knife, but she did not move, remembering the words of Jaqen H'ghar. A girl must serve, a girl must watch, a girl must wait. She placed the tray carefully, hands trembling, and Tywin's eyes flicked up, cold and golden as a cat's. "You're shaking, girl. Why?" "It's cold, my lord," she lied. "The kitchens are cold in the mornings." His gaze lingered. She wondered if he saw through her, if he knew what she was, who she was. But then he turned back to his letter, waving her away with a flick of his fingers. She fled, heart pounding. In the corridor she found Hot Pie waiting, clutching a sack of flour to his chest. "What's wrong with you?" he whispered. "Nothing," Arya said, but her mind was racing, replaying every word, every glance. The castle was full of secrets. If she listened well enough, perhaps she could find one that would turn all the Lannisters' victories to ash. The chance came sooner than she dreamed. That night, Whis sent her to deliver a message to Lord Tywin's Solar. She moved quietly, gliding through the corridors like a shadow, pausing at each turn to listen. Near the Solar she heard voices, low, tense, urgent. Lord Tywin, unmistakable, and another, softer but sharp. Arya pressed herself against the stones, heart in her throat. "You go too far, my lord," said the second voice. "If the Queen were to learn of this—" "The Queen is thousands of leagues away," Tywin replied, "and she will do as I command. We cannot risk the truth reaching King's Landing. Not until I have secured the support of House Tyrell, and not a day sooner. You gamble with the realm itself. If it comes to light that you have—" "Enough," Tywin snapped. "The truth dies here, with us. The child will remain in Lannisport, under my guard, until the time is right." "Nan?" Arya's mind whirled. The child. What child? She strained to hear more, but footsteps sounded, and she shrank back into the darkness, melting away as a pair of Lannister guards strode past. The rest of the night passed in a haze. Weasley's blows, the ceaseless labor, the stifling knowledge that she had heard something powerful, something dangerous. She lay awake, replaying the words, trying to make sense of them. Was there a secret heir? A bastard? Or some dark plot? She did not know. But she did know one thing. Secrets could kill, but they could also save. In the days that followed, she watched Tywin more closely than ever, cataloging every visitor, every scroll, every quiet conversation. She slipped through shadows, silent and unseen. Once she found a scrap of parchment, dropped from a lord's sleeve. Half burnt, the ink smudged, but the seal unmistakable. A golden lion. She tucked it beneath her tunic, reading it that night, by sliver moonlight. The words were few, but enough. The boy will not be harmed. No one must know until the matter is settled. House Lannister's future depends upon secrecy. Arya's pulse raced. She thought of Robb, of her mother, and brothers. If she could bring this to them, proof of a secret the Lannisters could not afford to lose, perhaps she could win back her place, her name. She thought too of Jaqen H'ghar and the 3 lives she had claimed. She had only one left. Should she give it for vengeance or for hope? She waited, watched, learned. It was not long before an opportunity came, as they always did to those who waited patiently enough. Lord Tywin received a visitor from Casterly Rock. Sir Kevan Lannister, his brother, come in haste from the west. The halls buzzed with talk. The servants nervous, the knights on edge. Arya crept from her duties, slipping through the cracks of the castle like smoke. She found her way to the solar, pressing herself flat against the wooden panel of a hidden door she'd discovered weeks ago. Through the thin slit, she could hear the voices, Lord Tywin, Sir Kevan, and another, a maester whose name she did not know. They are closing in, Sir Kevan murmured. Your position here is becoming untenable. The Northmen have taken another of our supply trains, and there is talk of rebellion in the Westerlands. The boy must remain hidden, Tywin said. If they learn of his existence, all our plans are undone. We must move him to a safer place. Casterly Rock, perhaps. No one would dare challenge us there. Damn. Even so, there are those who suspect. They suspect nothing. The boy is the key. When the time is right, he will be revealed. But not yet. Arya slipped away before she was missed, her mind racing. A hidden boy, the key to House Lannister's future, being moved to Casterly Rock. If she could expose this secret, if she could deliver proof to the right hands, she could break the lion's hold over the realm. She could win her way home. That night, as she swept the floors of the main hall, she caught sight of Jaqen H'ghar. Standing in the shadows near the gatehouse, she moved to him, silent as a ghost. A girl has learned a secret, she whispered. Jaqen smiled, his eyes glimmering. A girl is clever, but secrets are dangerous. A girl must be sure. I'm sure, Arya said, but I don't know what to do. Jaqen looked at her, the corners of his mouth turning upward in a knowing smile. A girl has one name left, but there are other ways to strike a blow. A clever girl finds allies, not just enemies. Arya nodded, understanding dawning. In the days that followed, she plotted her course with care. She observed Lord Tywin's movements, watched as he prepared for his departure. He would ride for Casterly Rock, taking with him the secret boy. She watched as messengers rode out from Harrenhal, carrying letters to lords across the realm. She watched as the Lannister army prepared to march. She chose her moment well. As Lord Tywin prepared to depart, Arya slipped into his chambers, careful and silent as a shadowcat. She searched quickly, methodically, finding at last a bundle of letters sealed with the golden lion. She took them, tucking them into her tunic, and fled. Outside she found Gendry, hard at work in the smithy. I need your help, she said. He looked up, sweat running down his brow. With what? I need to get out of the castle. Tonight. He stared at her, understanding in his eyes. It's dangerous. I know, Arya replied, but it's the only way. Together, they planned her escape. Hot Pie agreed to help, slipping food from the kitchens. That night, As the castle slept, Arya crept through the shadows, past the guards, through the postern gate. Gendry was waiting with a stolen horse. She climbed up, clutching the letters to her chest. She rode hard through the night, the wind cold on her face. She rode until dawn, when at last she reached a small village at the edge of the Blackwater. There she found a septon, a kindly old man who agreed to deliver her message, to carry the letters to Robb Stark at River Run, along with a plea for help. Days passed in hiding, Arya changing her name again, waiting for a sign. She moved from village to village, always alert for Lannister scouts. At last, word reached her. Lord Tywin had been recalled to King's Landing, and the secret boy was being held at Casterly Rock, heavily guarded. But the letters had reached her brother, and Robb Stark was on the move, his army marching west. The war shifted. Battles were fought, towns burned, men died. Through it all, Arya watched and waited. She heard tales of Robb's victories, of the Lannisters driven back, of Casterly Rock besieged. She heard too of a secret exposed. A boy revealed his claim to House Lannister's legacy, shattering the unity of the Lion's banner. At last, the walls of Casterly Rock fell. Robb Stark's army swept through the halls of the Lion, banners of the direwolf flying high. Tywin Lannister was slain in battle, his plans undone by a slip of parchment and a servant's keen eyes. Arya rode with her brother's men into the halls of the Rock, the letters she had stolen now displayed before the assembled lords. They called her hero, the Wolf of the West, the girl who broke the Lion's pride. But Arya felt only emptiness. She had won, but at what cost? She had seen death and ruin, and she was still far from home. She wandered the halls of Casterly Rock, feeling the weight of the stones pressing down. One night, Robb found her atop the highest tower, looking out across the sea. "You did this," he said quietly. "You broke them. You saved us." Arya shook her head. "I just listened. I just watched." "Them? That's more than most ever do," Robb replied. He looked at her, pride and sorrow in his eyes. "They want to make you Lady of Casterly Rock. The lords say you've earned it." She stared at him, stunned. "May? But I'm not. You're Arya Stark of Winterfell," Robb said. "And you're the bravest of us all." She stood silent, watching the waves crash against the cliffs far below. She thought of all she had lost, all she had become. Lady of Casterly Rock, ruler of the greatest castle in the West. It felt like a dream, or a lie. But perhaps, she thought, it was a new beginning. So Arya Stark became Lady of Casterly Rock. Her name whispered in the halls with awe and fear. She ruled with the cunning of a wolf and the strength of a lion, ever watchful, ever wary. She did not forget the lessons of Harrenhal, nor the price of secrets. And in the shadows of the great castle, she carved her own legend, one step closer to finding her way home. Kami. The wind off the Sunset Sea was colder than the Northmen had warned, howling through the highest towers and coursing down Casterly Rock's stony veins. Arya stood alone upon the western ramparts, the salt spray prickling her face, the distant waves crashing against black cliffs below. Behind her, the rock rose, impossibly vast, more mountain than castle, its halls echoing with centuries of Lannister pride and cruelty. Beneath her feet, the world shifted. Arya Stark, once nameless and hunted, was now called Lady of Casterly Rock. The title sat ill upon her shoulders. The courtiers who filled the Rock's lower halls with anxious laughter and false courtesy watched her as one might watch a wounded direwolf, beautiful and unpredictable. They did not know how to place her. She was not a lion, not in blood nor in bearing. And though she bore the name of Stark, she was not the gentle lady Sansa would have been. Arya moved through their polished corridors like a shadow, silent and swift, her gray eyes missing nothing. It was Robb who had named her lady. In the aftermath of Tywin Lannister's death and the city's bloody fall, there had been resistance, Lannister loyalists, defiant knights, distant kin with thin claims. But Robb had been unyielding. "She broke the lion," he declared. "Her deeds brought us this victory." His bannermen, weary and bloodied, had cheered her name. The West was cowed, its gold now feeding northern coffers, and Arya was expected to rule. She could not refuse. To refuse would have been to cast aside her brother's trust, to spurn the hope in her men's eyes. So Arya donned the colors of the Rock, crimson and gold, worn over gray and white beneath, a subtle defiance, and tried to learn the ways of those she had beaten. Every day she felt as if she were wearing someone else's skin, another mask she could not discard. She carried needle at her side, hidden beneath the silks the chambermaids pressed upon her, and she wore the face of a lady for those who demanded it. In her heart, she was Arya of Winterfell, a wolf among lions. In the first days of her rule, the castle swelled with strangers. Lannister kin arrived from the west, seeking to curry favor or demand restitution. River lords pressed claims for land and gold. Even men from the Reach, allies of House Tyrell, came with smiling faces and hidden daggers. Arya met them all in the Golden Hall, seated upon the lion's seat. Her presence unsettled them. She was too young, too northern, her voice sharp and her patience thin. One afternoon, as the sun sank red and swollen beyond the sea, a delegation from the Westerland's lesser houses waited in the hall. Arya entered with no fanfare, her steps silent on the golden tiles. The assembled lords and ladies rose, uncertain. Some stared at her with naked hostility. Others hid their calculations behind courtly smiles. Sir Flamont Brax, whose house had always bent the knee to Lannister, stepped forward first. He bowed deeply, though Arya saw the stiffness in his back. "Lady Stark," he began, his voice honeyed, "the houses of the West hope for peace. But many wonder at this new arrangement. You are not of our blood. How shall the Rock stand strong with a wolf for its lady?" Arya met his gaze. "The Rock stands strong because it endures," she said. "But a rock can be broken by a river, given time. And a lion alone is easy prey for a pack of wolves. I am here because I listened, because I watched. The same cannot be said for your old lord." Bah! There was a ripple of unease in the hall. Arya pressed on. "Peace will come, but not at the cost of justice. The days of lions preying on lambs are ended. The North remembers, and now, so must the West." The lords murmured among themselves. Some looked away, chastened. Others burned with resentment. Arya felt their hatred, sharp as a blade, but she welcomed it. She was no fool. She knew she ruled only as long as she held their fear and their grudging respect. When the lords departed, Arya turned to the steward, a thin man named Martin, who had served Tywin loyally for decades. "Send a raven to River Run. Tell my brother I need his counsel. And have Maester Pylos come to me at dusk." Martin bowed. "At once, my lady." That night, Arya paced her solar, lit only by the dull glow of embers in the hearth. She traced the scars upon the ancient table, thinking of the secrets that had undone House Lannister. Tywin's letters, the hidden boy. Gone now, spirited away by his mother before the fall. The lords of the West whispered about him. The bastard Tywin had tried to hide, but no one dared speak his name aloud. Fear, Arya thought, would keep them silent for now. But fear alone would not hold the Rock. Maester Pylos arrived, his chain clinking softly in the dark. He was old, his hair thin and white, his eyes keen. He had served 3 generations of Lannisters, yet he had bent the knee to her with little protest. Arya wondered what he truly thought. "You sent for me, my lady?" Arya nodded. "How many men can the Rock muster if needed?" Pylos pursed his lips. "With the loyal lords, perhaps 5,000. But the mines run thin. Tywin spent much of the gold fighting Robb's war. Morale is low. The small folk are afraid." Arya considered. "What of the grain stores? Enough for 2 winters, though less than before. The Lannisters have always relied on the Reach for much of their food. Now that the Tyrells are cautious, trade has slowed." Arya leaned forward. "Send word to House Lefford?" House Payne and House Harrenhal. Invite their heirs to foster here at the Rock. Tell them they'll be treated as honored guests, and that I wish to learn the ways of the West." Pylos bowed his head, the faintest glimmer of respect in his eyes. "A wise move, my lady. You will make the rock your own in time." After the maester left, Arya sat alone, her mind restless. She had survived so much. Harrenhal, the wilds, the fall of the lion. But ruling was another kind of battle. There were no faces to steal here, no easy deaths. Here, she must play the game that had killed so many before her. The days passed, each one much like the last, though the world shifted in small ways. Gendry, now grown into his strength and pride, had come with Robb's army. He took over the Rock's Forge, his broad back and quick laugh earning him friends among the small folk and grudging respect from the Lannister men-at-arms. He was the one person Arya could truly speak with, and often she found herself in the smithy late at night, watching him work, the heat and the clang of hammer on steel reminding her of simpler times. One night, as she leaned against the cool stone wall, Gendry looked up from his anvil. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked. "The road. The running." "Then so." Arya smiled. "Small and sad. Every day. This place is a prison in its own way." Gendry nodded. "You're not made for silks and feasts, Arya. Neither are you." He laughed, a warm, rough sound. "No, but someone's got to make swords for your knights, don't they?" She watched him work a moment longer, then said quietly, "They're not my knights." "They'd turn on me if Robb fell?" Gendry shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe you'll win them." "You did at Harrenhal." Arya thought of the ghosts that haunted her. Jaqen Syrio Forel, Yoren. She wondered what they would make of her now, lady of a castle she had once dreamed of sacking. The following morning brought new trouble. A messenger from Lannisport arrived with news of unrest. Bands of outlaws, calling themselves the Gold Cloaks Returned, were raiding caravans, stealing gold and grain. Their leader, a knight of Lannister blood, was rallying those loyal to the old ways. Arya summoned her council. The steward Martin, Maester Pylos, Sir Harry Swift, and the new captain of her guard, a taciturn Northman named Darren. Sir Harris was the first to speak, his face flushed with worry. "We must act, my lady. If these outlaws are not stopped, they'll inspire more rebellion." Arya nodded. "Who leads them?" "A bastard of House Lannister." "Sir Tyrek," called the Black Lion. "He claims the rock has been stolen by northern usurpers." Martin cleared his throat. "The small folk whisper that Tywin's ghost walks the halls. They say the castle is cursed for crowning a wolf." Arya's lips twitched. "Let them. Ghosts cannot harm me." Darren leaned forward. "If you give me 50 men, I'll hunt these outlaws to their den." Arya shook her head. 50 men, and you'll lose them all. The Gold Cloaks are clever. We'll lure them in." "Menci." Sir Harry's frowned. "How?" Arya's eyes glimmered. "We offer a parley. Send word to Sir Tyrek, invite him to the rock. Promise safe conduct. When he comes, we show him the strength of our walls and the generosity of our table. If he's wise, he'll bend a knee. If not, he'll hang." It was a dangerous gambit, and her council knew it. But Arya had learned the value of boldness in the shadows of Harrenhal. Word was sent, and within a week, Sir Tyrek arrived. A young man, golden-haired and arrogant, armored in black and gold. He was attended by a dozen hard-eyed men, each one a veteran of a dozen battles. The parley was held in the Lion's Hall, Arya seated on the high seat, her guard arrayed in silence. Sir Tyrek bowed mockingly. "Lady Stark, I see the stories are true. The wolf rules the rock." Arya smiled coolly. "And the lion hides in the brush. Why are you here, Sir Tyrek?" "To reclaim what is ours," he said, his hand resting on his sword hilt. "The rock belongs to House Lannister. My blood runs as true as yours." Arya stood, her presence filling the hall. "You want the rock? Take it. But know this, every stone is soaked in Lannister blood. Your uncle built his legacy on corpses. I'll not do the same. If you wish to serve, I'll have you at my side. If you wish to fight, I'll hang you from the highest tower." There was a hush, then a ripple of laughter among her men. Tyrek's face twisted in fury, but Arya saw the uncertainty in his eyes. "I will not serve a wolf," he spat. "Then you'll die like a lion," Arya said softly. "Take him." Darren and his men moved swiftly, subduing Tyrek and his guards before they could draw steel. The Gold Cloak's rebellion ended with barely a whimper. Tyrek was hanged from the battlements, his body left for the crows. Afterward, Arya stood atop the ramparts, watching the sun dip beneath the waves. The people of the Rock gathered below, some cheering, others silent. The message was clear. There would be no more Lannister rule, no more rebellion. Still, Arya felt little triumph. She knew more challenges would come. Autumn deepened. The days grew shorter, the winds sharper. Arya spent her mornings training with Darren in the yard, her evenings in council, her nights walking the empty halls. She began to learn the names of her servants, the stories of her people. She visited the mines, the forges, the stables. She listened to complaints, settled disputes, and offered justice as best she could. Slowly, grudgingly, the Rock began to accept her. One day, a letter arrived from River Run. It was from Robb, written in his bold, looping hand. "Arya, you are winning them. I hear it in every raven, every whisper. But beware, gold runs deep, and the Lannisters are never truly beaten. Sansa is well, as is Bran. Mother misses you. I miss you. Hold fast. Winter is coming. Your brother, Robb." Arya read the letter twice, then a third time. She tucked it away in her sleeve, feeling the warmth of her family's love, even so far from home. It strengthened her. Days became weeks, and weeks months. The first snows dusted the hills, and Arya rode out often, visiting her vassals, learning the ways of the West. She rode with Gendry and Darren, hunting along the cliffs, meeting the small folk. She saw the poverty that Tywin's wars had wrought, the hunger that lingered in the valleys. She sent what aid she could, though she knew it would not be enough. The lords of the West watched her, some with admiration, some with resentment. She ignored their gossip, focusing on what she could change. One evening, as she walked the halls, Arya came upon Martin, the steward, arguing with a nervous young man, a scribe newly arrived from Lannisport. "My lady." The scribe gasped, bowing low. "There is news." "Ships in the harbor," word sails. "They fly the Lion's banner. Sir Davin Lannister comes with a fleet." Arya's heart quickened. She called her council, sending ravens to her bannermen. The Rock readied for siege. Dawn broke gray and bitter. The red-sailed ships anchored below, out of reach of the castle scorpions. Sir Davin sent a herald, demanding Arya's surrender. Arya refused. The standoff stretched for days, neither side willing to commit. At last, Arya devised a plan. She sent Gendry and a band of trusted men through the secret tunnels Tywin had used in his youth, descending from the Rock's hidden faces to the beaches below. Under cover of night, they set fire to the Lannister ships, the flames a signal to the defenders on the walls. The enemy, caught unawares, was thrown into chaos. Arya led her garrison in a sally, driving the attackers from the shore. The siege was broken. Sir Davin fled, his forces shattered. The victory brought new respect. The lords of the West began to see her, not as a usurper, but as a true lady, a leader who could defend the Rock against all comers. Arya held feasts for her soldiers, honoring the bravest. She remembered their names, their families, their deeds. She listened, and she learned. One night, after the revels, she found herself alone on the ramparts, Gendry at her side. The wind was cold, but she did not mind. "You're different now," Gendry said quietly. Not the girl I met in King's Landing. Arya smiled. Neither are you. He hesitated. Do you ever think of leaving? Going home? Arya looked out at the sea, the moonlight silver on the waves. This is my home, for now. But one day, yes, I'll go north. I'll see Jon and Bran and Sansa. I'll find Needle again, in the heart of the world. Gendry nodded. When you do, take me with you. She laughed softly, and for a moment she felt at peace. Winter was coming. The world was changing. But Arya Stark, Lady of Casterly Rock, stood unbowed atop the greatest stronghold in the west, her heart filled with the memory of wolves and the promise of home. And in the halls below, the lords and ladies whispered her name, not as an enemy nor as a stranger, but as the ruler they had never expected and could never forget. Ka. The snows deepened with the waning of the year, cloaking the stone slopes of Casterly Rock in rare white. Each day dawned gray and bitter, gulls circling in the leaden sky above the churning sea. Arya paced the high galleries before dawn, her breath steaming as she passed frost-rimed windows, a direwolf stalking the lion's lair. There was a restlessness within her that not even the weight of her new responsibilities could contain. She was lady in name and duty, but there were days she could almost feel the silent gaze of Tywin Lannister behind her shoulder, daring her to falter. Below, the castle stirred. Cooks in the kitchens, small folk in the bailey, gold-cloaked guards moving with wary discipline. Each man and woman she passed had a story, a hope, a memory of the old rule, and in their eyes she sometimes glimpsed the embers of defiance. But there was also a grudging respect, growing by slow degrees, as the winter deepened and the rock remained strong. On the first day of the new moon, Arya sat in the solar with Maester Pylos, his long fingers sifting through parchment and sealed letters. Reports from the mines, from the surrounding valleys, from Lannisport, from the Riverlands. She listened carefully to each word, weighing them with the kind of attention she'd learned in the alleys of Bravos. House Lefford has tripled their grain levy, Pylos announced, peering through his spectacles. They fear famine if the snows linger. Sir Garland Tyrell offers a trade, grain for gold at rates set by Old Town. Arya nodded. Send our acceptance, but tell Sir Garland we'll need his promise to protect our caravans. And ask House Lefford if they require coin or laborers for their fields. If they're hungry, so are we. Men? And from the coast, pirates near Case. A Lannister cousin claims your rule endangers trade. Arya's lips thinned. Send Gendry and 3 of the new-built ships. Give him leave to hire local captains. But make it clear. If they prey on our folk, I'll see their heads on pikes. No exceptions. Pylos nodded, making careful notes. He regarded her with an approving gaze, the same one she'd grown used to over the past months. You have a keen mind for this work, my lady. You are not like the Lannisters. I am not, Arya replied, voice flat. She thought of Sansa. Who would have charmed these lords, won them over with smiles and silken words? Arya could only be herself, blunt, cold, direct. And yet, the realm did not need silk now. It needed steel. As the day lengthened, Arya walked the halls, speaking with household knights and merchants. She listened to tales of hunger, of children lost to fever, of wives mourning husbands taken by the sea. Each story was a stone added to her burden. She watched Gendry's forge through the open door, flames leaping as he hammered iron, his face streaked with sweat. When she caught his eye, he smiled, and she felt the world ease its grip for a breath. It was late when the first raven arrived, bearing a strip of red silk and a message sealed with a crowned rose. Sansa Stark, Lady of Winterfell, and Queen in the North. Arya's hands trembled as she broke the seal. The words were careful, written in her sister's graceful hand, and spoke of peace, of new alliances in the Riverlands, of whispers from King's Landing. Sansa's tone was both loving and circumspect. She asked after Arya's health, after the mood of the West, and suggested the possibility of a summit between North and Rock, to be held come spring. Arya read the letter thrice, then once more, staring at her sister's name. She felt a pang of longing, old as memory, for the halls of Winterfell, the quiet of the godswood, Jon's laughter on a snowy morning. That night, Arya summoned her council. They met in a small side chamber, tapestries drawn to block the worst of the cold. The fire sputtered, barely touching the chill. "We have an invitation," she told them. "Winterfell wants peace and alliance. My sister wishes us to join her in the spring to speak of unity between North and West." Martin, the steward, looked uneasy. The Lannisters are broken," said Darren. "Her northern captain, but not gone. There are those who'd rather see the rock in ashes than ruled by a Stark." "Men? Let them try," Arya replied, voice cool as the snow outside. "If we are to survive, we need peace, and we need friends." "Will you go?" Gendry asked quietly. Arya met his eyes. "I must. But the rock must stand in my absence. Darren, you'll command in my stead. Gendry, you'll keep the forges working, arms for every household knight, ships ready to sail. Martin, you know the grain stores as well as any man alive. Maester Pylos, you will carry word to the maesters of the Citadel. We support Sansa's call for peace." They nodded, each understanding the trust she placed in them. The weeks that followed were a whirl of preparation. Stores inventoried, ships provisioned, letters sent, alliances tested and retested. Arya kept a close watch on the Lannister kin who lingered in the shadows of the rock. Ser Flamont Brax and others like him grumbled, but she made clear her justice would be fair and her wrath quick. As the snows began to soften with the promise of spring, Arya readied to depart. She dressed in practical leathers and mail, a white cloak over her shoulders, the direwolf brooch pinned at her throat. She left Gendry in command of the forges and promised she would return before the summer harvest. The journey north was long and perilous. Bands of outlaws haunted the roads, some wearing the Lion's badge, others only rags and hunger. Arya rode at the head of a small escort, Darren at her side, a dozen sworn men behind. She slept beneath the stars, sword at hand, dreams filled with the dead and the lost. The crossing of the Green Fork was the most dangerous, the river swollen with melted snow. Arya's men built makeshift rafts, and the crossing took a full day. Horses swimming, men cursing. She watched the water swirl, thinking of Robb, of Catelyn, of all that had been lost to the river's cold embrace. On the third day, she glimpsed the towers of Riverrun rising over the red and gold woods. Lord Edmure Tully greeted her in the great hall, older and grayer but still with a Tully's warmth. He spoke of his son, of the Riverland's new prosperity, of his gratitude for the justice Arya had brought to the west. "We have heard tales, Arya," he said, pouring her wine as they dined beside a crackling fire. "They call you the Wolf of the West. The children of the Rock chant your name." Arya smiled, tired but pleased. "It is not my name they fear. It is the end of the old order. I am only a girl from the north, with sharp eyes and a longer memory." Then Sao. They spoke of Sansa, of peace, of the need for strength. Edmure promised his men would patrol the southern borders, while Arya traveled north. She left Riverrun at first light, the sky blushing rose behind her. On the road, her men exchanged tales with the small folk, who marveled at the young woman in mail, her face scarred and proud. 2 days later, they rode into Winterfell as the gates swung wide, banners snapping in the northern wind. Sansa met her in the courtyard, surrounded by knights and ladies, her red hair catching the light. She embraced Arya, long and fierce, and for a moment Arya was a girl again, lost in the comfort of her sister's arms. "You are thinner than I remember," Sansa whispered. "But your eyes are sharper. I see more than I once did," Arya replied. They walked together through the Godswood, voices low. Sansa spoke of the North's strength, of the alliances she'd forged, of Bran's visions and Jon's letters from beyond the wall. She listened as Arya described the West, the feasts and the forges, the plots she'd foiled, the men she'd hanged. "You're not afraid?" Sansa asked, watching a snowflake melt on Arya's glove. "I am," Arya admitted. "Every day." but fear sharpens me." That night, the Stark sisters shared a private supper. They laughed over old memories, of Arya's pranks, of Septa Mordane's lectures, of Bran's climbing, of Jon's kindness. The pain of loss was there, always, but so was the hope of something new. In the days that followed, the lords of the north and west arrived, banners fluttering. Lefford and Crakehall, Rhyswell and Manderley, Tallhart and Brax. They gathered in the great hall to witness the forging of a new peace. Sansa presided, regal and composed, Arya at her side. Together, they outlined the terms: mutual defense, open trade, an end to blood feuds. There were grumbles and protests, but the power of the two Stark sisters was undeniable. Arya made her case bluntly. "If we do not stand together, the dragons and lions of the south will come for us. I have seen what the old ways bring: ruin, ashes. We must be better." Her words struck home. The lords pledged their banners, and the pact was sealed with oaths and feasting. The celebrations lasted 3 days, fires blazing against the chill. Arya danced once with Gendry, who had arrived with a wagon load of blades from the rock. His hands were rough, but his smile was shy, and she felt her heart leap in a way it had not since she was a child. On the last night, Sansa found Arya beneath the heart tree, staring up at the red leaves. "You could stay," Sansa said softly. "You belong here." Arya shook her head. "Not yet. The West is still uncertain. I must see my work finished." "You are more like father than any of us," Sansa whispered. "You bear the weight." Arya smiled sadly. "But he lost his head, Sansa. I do not wish the same fate." In the morning, Arya rode south again, her heart heavy, but her resolve firm. She knew now that she could never be just a wolf, nor wholly a lion. She was both, shaped by war and loss and survival. The journey home was easier, the roads safer, the people kinder. Arya returned to Casterly Rock in the height of spring, the cliffs ablaze with wildflowers, the air thick with the scent of the sea. The castle had changed in her absence. The walls were cleaner, the yards busier, the people more at ease. Gendry greeted her with news. Piracy had dwindled, the mines were producing again, and grain stores were full. Arya resumed her rule with a new confidence. She held court in the Golden Hall, heard petitions from the great and small, rode the lands of the West with her household knights. When the children of House Lefford and Crakehall came to foster, she greeted them herself, teaching them to ride and shoot, to speak truth and know honor. At night, she sometimes walked the ramparts alone, Needle at her side, and watched the sea batter the rock. She thought of her father, of Robb and Jon, of Sansa and Bran. She remembered Harrenhal, the faces she'd worn, the lives she'd taken. She remembered the girl who'd been no one, and the lady she'd become. Sometimes, when the sky was clear, she climbed the western tower and looked north, toward the cold lands that had shaped her. She whispered the names of the dead, the lost, the avenged. And then she turned back to the living, to her people, to the children who would inherit a world she had forged from blood and hope. She was Arya Stark, Lady of Casterly Rock, a wolf among lions, a legend reborn in the halls of her enemies, and in the silence before the dawn. She allowed herself to dream, for the first time in many years, that the world could be remade, and that peace, hard won and dearly bought, might at last endure. Spring at Casterly Rock was a different beast than Arya had ever known. The cliffs, usually so bare and cold, glittered with wildflowers, cobalt and gold, clinging to the stones with desperate resilience, the same way Arya felt herself clinging to her purpose in these halls of vanished lions. She walked the upper gardens at dawn, dew dampening the hem of her boots, the sharp scent of salt and blossom commingling on the wind. There were mornings when she forgot, for a heartbeat, that she ruled this place. The illusion never lasted long. Most mornings began with council in the sunlit gallery. A ring of voices Arya had learned to weigh and rank. Martin the steward, ever fretful and precise. Sir Harris swift, blunt as a cudgel and twice as loyal. Maester Pylos quiet, wily, eyes always on the long game. And Gendry still a smith, still unbent, whose advice was often blunt but rooted in the hard knowledge of common sense. On this morning, they gathered early, the first chill of spring still clinging to the stones. Arya, seated at the end of the long table, regarded a sheaf of letters that had come from Lannisport, from Sansa, and from far-off Old Town. Martin cleared his throat, fidgeting with a velvet ledger. There are rumors of trouble along the coast. Raiders again. But this time not the usual sort. Reports say they wear no banners and strike fast, taking prisoners. Arya's fingers curled tight around the cup in her hand. Ironborn. No, my lady. At least none seen with the Kraken sigil. Some say... Well, some say they speak of dragons, Targaryen colors, though I doubt. Arya's heart leapt before logic doused it. No dragon has flown in Westeros since Daenerys vanished, she said. Still, double the watch on the towers. No ships leave the harbor without my word. Gendry, you'll see to the armory. He nodded, already halfway to his feet. Sir Harris grumbled. If it's dragons, we'll need more than steel. Arya only shrugged. A wolf doesn't fear what it can't see, but it's wise to be ready. Ben-day. By midday, Arya was in the training yard. She moved among the young squires and fosterlings, sons and daughters of Lefford, Crakehall, Brax, and more, watching them drill with wooden swords, running foot races, reciting their lessons. She stopped beside the youngest, a dark-eyed girl from House Payne, her wrist red from a heavy blow. "Show me your grip," Arya said. The girl obliged, fingers stiff and clumsy. Arya took the stick, demonstrated, her movements sure, economical, the water dancer's grace never fully abandoned. You're strong, but you waste your force. Let the blade do the work. Be patient. Let them come to you. The girl's mouth set in a stubborn line, but she nodded, trying again. Arya watched them all, teaching when she could, correcting with more patience than anyone in her own youth had shown her. She remembered Syrio, her father, Jon. In these moments she felt herself less a lady and more the wolf she'd always been. But every lesson was also a test, for them and for her. They must learn to follow her not because she was a Stark, but because she was their lady. That afternoon, Arya received a rider from River Run. The Tully banners were bright in the courtyard, and Edmure's son, Merritt, carried the letter himself. Pale, nervous, clearly new to such errand. She ushered him inside, had bread and salt set before him. "My father bids you greetings, my lady," Merritt stammered. "He asks your counsel. There is unrest along the southern rivers, free riders, perhaps outlaws. He fears the Trident may be threatened if the Reach and the West do not stand together." Arya read Edmure's letter twice. There were words within words, requests for grain and steel, a reminder that peace was ever fragile, and a subtle query about Arya's own strength, her army's numbers, her treasury's health. It was diplomacy, the kind Sansa handled as easily as breath. Arya found it as tedious as a page of sums, but she replied with all the patience she could muster, pledging support and promising to send a detachment of Lannister crossbowmen to bolster the river's defense. As she sealed the letter, she pressed the direwolf into the crimson wax, her heart steady. Every promise, every letter, bound her more tightly to the fate of the rock. As the weeks passed, Arya found herself ever busier. She held court twice a week, presiding over disputes between tenant farmers and landowners, hearing the endless complaints of merchants who felt slighted or taxed, settling minor blood feuds that still flared in the outlying villages. She became a familiar sight in the town at the foot of the rock, riding alone or with a small retinue, listening to the gossip of butchers and fishwives, drinking sour wine at the dockside tavern. Once, she found herself caught between a pair of squabbling goldsmiths, each accusing the other of fraud. Arya listened to their bickering, then asked to see their work. She weighed each necklace, examined every clasp and setting, then tossed both pieces into a pail of salt water. The true gold shone untouched, the false dulled and tarnished. She handed the real necklace to the wronged man, tossed the other back to its maker. "The sea shows what men hide," she said, and the small folk remembered it. Another day, she visited the mines. The air was thick with dust and sweat, the clamor of hammers echoing through the tunnels. Gendry walked beside her, bare-armed and grim, nodding to the foremen as she listened to their grievances. Wages, injuries, the veins of gold grown thinner than in Tywin's day. "It's hard work," Gendry said, voice low as they left the darkness behind. "Harder when men remember the old times." Arya nodded. "They'll remember new times if we give them reason. No man leaves the mine hungry. No boy goes into the tunnels until he's grown. Pay them fair and keep the healers close." Word spread quickly, as word always did. By the next moon, the miners' wives were baking extra loaves for the hall. Small kindnesses grew into trust, and the trust into loyalty, though Arya never dared to think herself beloved. She knew too well the fate of beloved rulers. One evening, as the sun set the rock aglow, Arya sat with Gendry on the battlements. The sea was calm, distant ships riding low on the horizon. "Are you happy?" he asked, turning a rough forged ring between his fingers. "Here, I mean, in all this." Arya thought for a long time. "Some days, some not. It's easier than I thought, and harder too. I don't belong here, but maybe no one really does. The rock belongs to itself." He snorted. "You belong wherever you stand, Arya." She looked at him, at the rough lines of his face, the honesty in his eyes. "Do you ever wish we'd just run? Gone east, or south, or—" He shook his head. "I'm where I want to be." They fell into a comfortable silence. Arya let the wind tug at her hair, the salt sting her eyes. The next day, a ship arrived from Old Town, its hull battered, its captain pale. He brought word of fresh unrest in the south, a claimant for the Targaryen name stirring the Dornish, rumors of dragon's eggs, unrest among the faith militant. Arya convened her council again, read every letter, weighed every scrap of gossip. "If war comes again, we'll need allies," Sir Harris warned. Arya agreed, though the prospect filled her with dread. "Send word to Sansa and to Edmure. We must not be divided." With spring ripening, the west saw an influx of travelers. Merchants from the Reach, sellswords out of Pentos, hedge knights and adventurers hoping to sell their swords. Arya walked among them in the guise of a serving girl, listening to their boasts and secrets. She learned of plots hatched by Lannister cousins, of alliances with the free cities, of old Tywin's gold hidden in vaults unknown. One night, masked in a plain cloak, Arya followed a suspicious merchant from the docks through the winding back alleys of Lannisport. She tracked him to a shuttered inn, where she listened at a crack in the boards as he bargained with a shadowy figure for a map, one that showed the secret tunnels beneath the rock. Arya crept away, heart pounding. By dawn, she had doubled the guards at every entrance and quietly dispatched a letter to Gendry and Sir Harris, warning them to watch for sabotage or theft. A week later, a fire broke out in the northern stables. Arya raced from her solar at the first cries, Gendry beside her, water bucket sloshing. They beat back the flames, saving half the horses. She caught the culprit herself, a boy, not yet 12, bribed by Lannister gold to slip a torch among the straw. Arya knelt before him, met his frightened eyes. "Why?" she asked, not unkindly. He swallowed, shivering. "My mother's sick. They said they'd pay me if I burned the horses." Arya's heart twisted. "We'll care for your mother," she said, "but you'll clean the stalls until the end of the year. That's your price, remember this." She kept her word, sending a healer to the boy's home. The stables were repaired within a fortnight, and the Rock's grooms swore to Arya's justice. Spring grew fat on the land. The valleys were green, rivers flush with snowmelt. Sansa sent word that she would visit before summer's end, and Edmure's son Merritt rode north to Foster with the Starks. Arya oversaw the planting of barley and wheat in the fields below the rock, walking each furrow, listening to the farmers' songs. But peace was never unbroken. One twilight, a rider galloped through the gates. Dusty, wild-eyed, the stark direwolf on his surcoat. He carried a blood-stained letter, marked with the seal of Winterfell. Arya broke it open, eyes darting over the words. Enemy hosts in the north. Old alliances fracturing. Jon Snow missing beyond the wall. Sansa calls the banners. Arya did not hesitate. She summoned her council that very night, outlined her orders, her voice steely. I go north at dawn. Gendry, you'll hold the rock until my return. Darren, ready 200 men, mounted and swift. Sir Harry's keep watch on the harbors. No Lannister or stranger leaves without your leave. They rode at first light, the air sharp with fear. The journey north was swifter than before, the roads cleared by scouts, villages on the alert for enemies. Arya felt the old thrill of movement, the bite of wind on her cheek, needle at her side. At Moat Cailin, she found Sansa already mustering her banners, flanked by Manderleys, Tallhearts, Umbers, Risewells, and more. The north was a fortress under siege. Arya and Sansa clasped hands before the army, their bond an unspoken oath. They come from the east, old ironborn foes, and a handful of traitor lords, Sansa told her, voice level. We stand together, or not at all. Arya took command of a scouting party, ranging far into the shadowy forests along the eastern shore. She found the enemy's trail, burnt farms, frightened refugees, banners ragged and unfamiliar. The Ironborn were fierce, but scattered, without true leaders. One midnight, Arya crept into an enemy camp, unseen as smoke. She listened to their chieftains squabble, heard their hunger and desperation. In the dark, she whispered old words, her prayer of names, and slipped away again, leaving a message carved on a tree. Winter is here. At dawn, she led her party in a lightning strike, breaking the enemy's foragers, freeing a dozen Stark prisoners. Her name spread ahead of her, Wolf in the west, Ghost in the north. As the summer solstice neared, the Ironborn and their allies broke and ran, melting into the woods or dying beneath the swords of Arya's men. The threat faded, but Arya remained in the north until Sansa was sure of the peace. She walked the halls of Winterfell, climbed to the battlements at sunset, spoke with Bran beneath the heart tree. You have changed, he told her, eyes distant as ever. So have you. Bran smiled, faint and mysterious. You are two things at once now, wolf and lion. It makes you strong, Arya, and it will make you lonely. Man. She felt that loneliness in her bones, a cold that no hearth could drive out. But she did not falter. When Arya at last returned to the rock, the people greeted her with cheers. The small folk lined the roads, tossing garlands, chanting her name. She rode at the head of her guard, Gendry waiting by the gate, his face alight with relief. Welcome home, my lady. Omnewend. The word was wait and hope and promise. That evening, Arya stood in the highest tower. The sea stretched endless before her. She remembered all the faces she had worn, the lives she had left behind. She was Arya Stark, Lady of Casterly Rock, wolf and lion, judge and sword, daughter of winter, hope of a new age. She watched the sun sink beyond the horizon and did not look away. Ka. The moon glimmered high over Casterly Rock, painting the sea in molten silver, and Arya stood in the cold hush atop the ramparts, the scent of salt and distant wildflowers threading the air. The day's cheers still rang in her ears, but night brought only quiet, the city below dark and restless. It was never truly silent, not here. She could hear the soft churn of the tide, the shouts of dockhands working late, the far-off clatter of hooves on the cobbles beyond the city gates. Arya wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the ache in her shoulders, a warrior's ache earned from weeks on the road, from battles fought in shadow and fire. The world was changing. The West was changing with it, and Arya felt the weight of it every time she met the eyes of the people who called her lady. They no longer looked at her with open mistrust, but with something warier and deeper. Hope, perhaps, and fear as well. She was still young, still strange, still a wolf among lions. But the children in the town learned her name before they learned the names of the seven, and the old miners left bread and meat on her table in thanks for safe tunnels and fair wages. She had become legend, though she wished for nothing but the simple certainty of her father's hand on her shoulder. The hush of the godswood at dusk. Inside the keep, the halls hummed with life. Arya passed through corridors lined with golden sconces and old banners, her boots soft on the cold stone. She paused outside the solar, where Gendry worked late, bent over a table littered with sketches and broken arrowheads, his brow furrowed in thought. He looked up as she entered, blue eyes tired but warm. "You missed supper," he said, voice low and gentle. "I wasn't hungry," Arya replied, and sat on the bench beside him, watching the dance of his hands as he turned a bit of iron over and over. "You should sleep." He grinned. "So should you. But you don't. You're as bad as the miners, up before the sun, asleep after midnight." She shrugged, staring at her hands. "There's always something. Some trouble. Some letter. Some new grudge." He nudged her shoulder. "They love you for it, you know." Arya huffed, unsure whether to laugh or groan. Love isn't always enough. He slid his rough palm over hers, the warmth surprising her. "It's a start." Later, when Arya walked the halls alone, she paused by a window overlooking the sea. The wind carried a song from the city below, a fisher's tune, simple and sad. She listened, letting the ache in her chest ease for a while. When she returned to her chambers, she found a letter waiting. Sansa's neat hand, sealed in pale blue wax. "Arya, the snows here have faded, but the ice lingers in the woods. Jon has not returned. Bran says he walks beyond the wall still, searching for something neither of us can name. I miss you. I wish you would visit more often. The North remembers, and needs you. Your loving sister, Sansa." Arya traced the words with her thumb. Guilt prickled in her, sharp as a thorn. She had promised Sansa she would visit before the year was out, but there was always something, another challenge, another threat, another crisis that only the Lady of the Rock could solve. When morning came, she was already in the yard before the sun rose, sparring with the youngest of the fosterlings, Lefford boys and Craighall girls, their cheeks flushed and their eyes bright with pride. They fell and rose and fell again, but Arya was patient, guiding them as Syrio had once guided her, never letting them see how her mind wandered north, always north, to Winterfell's snow and the family she could never quite touch. Afterward, she found Gendry at the forge, sleeves rolled, sweat streaming down his temples. He was teaching a pair of apprentices to set a blade. Simple work, but honest, the kind she envied. He looked up at her approach, eyes brightening. "Another letter from the North?" he guessed, reading her as he always did. Arya nodded, not trusting herself to speak. "You miss them. Every day. Then go. I'll hold the rock." She shook her head. "The last time I left, the stables burned. The mines nearly collapsed. The Braxes tried to poison the well. And you handled it. You'll handle it again. Let the world bend a little while you find your family. Then?" Arya smiled, a genuine warmth bubbling through her for the first time that day. Perhaps. Later that morning, a delegation arrived from Old Town. A tall hawk-faced septon and 2 Tyrell knights in rose and gold. They requested an audience in the Golden Hall, and Arya received them on the high seat, surrounded by the banners of both West and North. The septon bowed low. "Lady Stark, the faith offers you the blessing of the Seven, and seeks assurance that Casterly Rock will stand with the realm should war come from the south." Arya studied him, his fingers twisted nervously at the cloth of his sleeve. She remembered what Gendry had said, "Let the world bend a little." She leaned forward, letting the sun catch the silver in her hair. "If war comes, we'll not take sides without cause," she said, voice clear as winter. "But the West will not stand idle if innocents are threatened. Nor will I permit the faith to use the rock for its own ends." The septon stiffened, but the Tyrell knights exchanged a glance. Respect, she thought, and perhaps a touch of relief. The Reach had long memories, and the gold of the rock still bought much in Old Town. After the meeting, Arya joined Gendry in the kitchens, where the cooks were rolling dough for a feast day. The kitchen was warm and noisy, children darting between tables, flour dusting the air. Gendry grinned as she slipped a bit of dough from the table, shaping it into a rough wolf. One of the cooks clucked her tongue, but let Arya work. "Should have known you'd sneak food," Gendry teased. She elbowed him, mock offended. "I'm lady here. I can take what I want." His answering laugh was low, the kind of sound she never tired of. In the weeks that followed, Arya oversaw the Spring Festival, a day of games and song, of trading and feasting, of contests in archery and wrestling and storytelling. She watched the people of the Rock begin to mingle with the farmers and tradesmen from the valley below. Children danced in circles, their voices bright and wild. Arya herself joined the archery contest, splitting a target at 100 paces, her wolf's cloak swirling behind her. That night, the fires on the beach burned high, and Arya slipped away from the crowd to walk the shoreline with Gendry. The surf foamed cold around their boots, moonlight limning their shadows. He caught her hand, calloused and sure. "Will you ever leave this place?" he asked softly. "Someday," she replied. "But not yet. You could go tomorrow and come back to find it stronger than ever. You've made it so." She shook her head, smiling. "Nothing is ever that easy." He squeezed her hand. "No, but you don't have to do it alone." As summer crept in, rumors began again. Whispers of movement in the east, of black sails on the horizon, of sellsword companies massing in the disputed lands beyond the Golden Tooth. Arya dispatched scouts, doubled the city guard, sent riders to every outpost. She also wrote to Sansa. "The West is restless. I feel the old world breaking and something new forming in its place. But I will visit soon. I promise." She sealed it with the dire wolf and lion together, a new sigil she had sketched herself, a symbol of the world she hoped to build. One muggy night, word reached Arya of a riot in Lannisport, a dispute between northern traders and local merchants. She rode down herself, a small retinue in tow, the city gates flung wide to greet her. The marketplace was chaos, broken stalls, spilled fruit, a child wailing beside a wounded father. Arya dismounted, sword at her hip, and waded into the tumult. She found the leaders, one a bearded Northman, the other a sharp-eyed woman in Lannister crimson. Arya stood between them, voice cool but loud enough for all to hear. "There will be no blood in these streets. Not for pride, not for old feuds. The Rock stands for peace, and peace is what I demand." It was not magic, but the people listened. She saw it in the way the crowd's fury stilled, the way the sharp-eyed merchant's lips trembled, the way the Northman lowered his fists. She ordered the wounded tended, the damages paid from her own treasury, and the ringleaders to work together restoring the market. As the sun rose, the city was quiet again. Arya rode back to the castle, exhausted, but with a sense of rightness she had not felt since leaving the north. In the months that followed, Arya traveled more, visiting every holdfast and village in the Westerlands, listening to the concerns of crofters and lords alike. She learned the names of every river, every peak, every family. She rode the golden roads, ate at every common table, slept in simple rooms with no guard at the door. One evening, far to the west, in a village perched on the edge of the sea, Arya shared a meal with an old shepherd and his wife. They told her tales of the sea lions who once ruled the cliffs, of the dark years when the Lannisters taxed them to the bone, of the day her men had rebuilt the storm-damaged breakwater. They pressed rough bread into her hands, and the old woman wept, calling her the Lady Wolf. Arya rode back through the night, heart full. In early autumn, Sansa arrived. Her train long and splendid, banners flying, knights resplendent in their mail. The castle erupted in celebration. Two Stark sisters together, the hope of peace made flesh. They walked the halls, remembering old stories, whispering new dreams. "You've changed this place," Sansa said as they watched the sun set from the Lion's Tower. "It suits you." Arya shook her head. "I suit myself. The Rock follows because it must. But it will endure." Sansa said, voice sure. They planned together, exchanging news, speaking of lords and sons and daughters, of the children who played in the halls. They spoke of Bran, still in the far north, of Jon, gone but not lost, of their mother's memory, of Ned and his hopes. On Sansa's last night, the sisters shared a meal in Arya's solar, bread and wine, cheese and apples, laughter echoing like it had when they were girls. When Sansa left, Arya watched her go, a bittersweet ache blooming in her chest. She returned to her duties, councils and judgments, feasts and festivals, letters and endless decisions. The world outside the rock grew more dangerous, but inside, the peace held. Winter would come again, as it always did, but Arya was ready. In the long evenings, she walked the ramparts with Gendry, sometimes in silence, sometimes in conversation. They spoke of the past, of the future, of the children growing up in their care. One night, as the wind howled and the surf crashed wild below, Gendry pressed something into her hand. A ring, forged of gold and iron, plain and strong. I can't give you a crown, he said, but I can give you this, not as a lord, but as myself. If you'll have it. Arya looked at him, heart full, and nodded. Always. But she wore the ring every day after, beneath her gloves, hidden but never forgotten. Years passed, and the rock changed with them. New mines opened, the city grew, peace held. The children Arya had trained grew into lords and ladies in their own right. Some left to serve in other castles, some stayed, becoming her council, her friends, her family. On her final night before returning once more to Winterfell, Arya climbed to the highest tower and looked out over the world she had shaped. The sea was dark and endless, the land below sleeping in peace. She was Arya Stark, wolf and lion, lady and sword, legend and woman. She had built something new from the ashes of old hate, and in doing so, had found a kind of home. She closed her eyes, breathed deep, and felt, for the first time in many years, at peace. Okay. The air sharpened as another winter crept upon the land. Westerly winds battered the golden cliffs and drove hard the gray-green surf against the roots of Casterly rock. In the bone-cold stillness before dawn, Arya woke restless in her great chamber, troubled by dreams of wolves pacing silent snow and a father's voice lost in the wind. The fire in her hearth was nearly out, its red heart winking like the last star before day. She rose quietly, wrapping herself in a rough cloak, and wandered the halls alone. The castle slept uneasily, the vast corridors echoing with the memory of those who'd come before her. Sometimes, Arya felt as though she walked through a sepulchre and not a living place. Each step a trespass in a world not meant for her. Yet, as she padded down the spiral stairs and out onto the western battlements, she glimpsed lamplight below. Late workers in the forge, men tending horses, a kitchen maid starting the ovens for the day's bread. Life clung to the rock with a stubbornness she recognized in herself. She drew strength from it. The sky paled above the sea. Arya leaned against the chill stone, watching the first hint of gold bleed into the horizon. She remembered the last time she'd seen Jon, wild in the eyes, his hair rime-frosted, speaking of duty and ghosts, and the call of the far north. She remembered Sansa's steady gaze, her quiet command in Winterfell's halls. She remembered her father's hands, strong and gentle, teaching her to hold a blade. The dawn came in a shiver of pale fire, and the castle woke with it. Arya descended to the yard, boots crunching on hoarfrost. She found Gendry already at work, his breath white, his hammer ringing on cold steel. He looked up as she approached, pushing back a stray lock of hair with his wrist. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She shook her head. "Wolves don't sleep well in the lion's den." He grinned, sweat steaming off his brow. "You've made it your den." They spoke little as he finished his work, but there was a comfort in the silence. Arya picked up a practice blade and sparred with Gendry in the pale morning light, each of them pushing hard, sweat and laughter warming the cold. When they finished, Gendry handed her a flask of small beer, and together they watched the sun climb higher. The day unfolded with its usual tide of troubles and tasks. Arya convened her council in the solar, Martin, Pylos, Sir Harris, and the others. Letters awaited. Reports from the mines. Complaints from merchants. Warnings from the northern border. A cold had settled in the valleys, biting crops and cattle alike. Sir Harris spoke first, voice gruff. Riders out of case say the gold veins are running thin. The miners demand higher pay, or they'll strike before snow falls. Arya listened, thinking of the hard faces in the mines, the bent backs and red-rimmed eyes. Double the bread ration through winter, pay them half in silver if gold grows scarce, and promise them a feast at the first thaw, with meat and mead for every hand that swung a pick. Martin scribbled furiously. Pylos nodded, satisfied. Sir Harris only grunted approval. A message from Old Town followed, written in careful, slanted script. House Tyrell seeking assurances of the Rock's loyalty in the coming year. An offer of a marriage alliance between one of their lesser cousins and a Harrenhal fosterling. Arya considered, knowing how swiftly peace could turn on a word or a ring. We accept the alliance in principle, but the match must be made at the Rock, Arya decided. And the Tyrells will send us grain enough for the poorest valley, not just for our own tables. Tell them the wolf's hospitality is more generous than the lion's. Martin grinned. Pylos smiled behind his chain. Arya saw the approval in their eyes and felt a twinge of pride. She had grown sharper in these matters, less impatient. She wondered if her mother would recognize her now. Later, Arya wandered the kitchens, sampling the day's stews, praising the cooks, slipping candied almonds to the children underfoot. The halls rang with song. Stories of the Lady Wolf, of mines made safe, of the great feast promised when spring came. Sometimes, Arya listened at doors, as she once had at Harrenhal, searching not for secrets, but for the timbre of her own name on the people's tongues. More often than not, she heard affection now, laced with the awe that power brings. The snows arrived early. One dawn, Arya woke to find the courtyards muffled in white, icicles framing the windows. She called the fosterlings to the yard, challenging them to a snowball fight. Her laughter ringing out as bright as any child's, her aim true as ever. The children worshipped her for these moments, and she felt the old ache for Winterfell lessen. Just a little. That night, the fires burned high in the great hall. Bread and meat, cheese and honey, the best the Rock could offer. Arya dined among her people, sharing jests with the guards, stories with the miners, quiet conversation with the merchant women who ran the markets below. Gendry sat beside her. The fosterlings crowded near his chair, each hoping for a story or a lesson. After the meal, Arya withdrew to her solar, where a letter awaited from Sansa Dottai. She read by firelight. Sansa's careful hand telling of the deep snows in the north, the growing peace, the promise of spring. There were questions too. About the new marriage alliance, about the mines, about Arya herself. Arya penned her reply with a steady hand. Winter is hard here, but our people are strong. The mines are thin, but the grain stores are full. I walk the halls each day and hear no talk of rebellion. Gendry is well, and the children grow fierce. I think often of home, but I have made a new one here. Come south when the road's clear. Bring Bran, if he will travel. Your sister, Arya. She set the quill aside, gaze lingering on the fire. She felt old. Some nights, older than her years. But she also felt steady. The next day brought trouble from the east. A company of sellswords, ragged but well-armed, riding hard for the coast. Arya met them on the field outside the Rock, her guard at her back. Their captain, a lean man with haunted eyes, demanded shelter for the winter, promising coin and service. Arya considered him for a long moment, measuring his desperation against her own needs. You can winter here, she said at last. You'll serve as guards for our roads, and you'll take oaths to me and mine. If one among you breaks faith, you'll answer for him all. Betray me, and you'll not see another sunrise. Nemsuan. The man knelt, and his company with him. Arya felt the weight of each choice she made. The knife's edge she walked between justice and necessity. The sellswords kept the peace that winter, patrolling the roads, helping the miners with the hardest tasks. driving off the last bands of Lannister loyalists in the wild valleys. Arya watched them, trusted them, but never fully. She knew too well how a blade could turn when coin ran out. One evening, after the last patrol returned, Arya walked the ramparts with Gendry. The moon hung low, casting strange shadows. "Do you ever miss the road?" she asked. Gendry shrugged. "Sometimes. But the road's behind us, Arya. We have a life here. A good one." She smiled, grateful for his certainty. They spoke of the future, of new mines, of repairing the old bridges, of teaching the fosterlings to smith and ride and rule. Gendry promised to build her a new blade come spring, one finer than needle, light as breath. The weeks blurred together. Council, court, feast, frost. Arya found herself waking each morning with purpose. Her stride confident, her eyes missing nothing. She learned to read the ledgers as easily as a map, to sense trouble in the set of a merchant's shoulders, to untangle the lies in a lord's complaint. She grew sharper, wiser, but never gentle. As spring drew near, Sansa's letter arrived, a promise kept. The queen in the north would travel to Casterly Rock, her court with her, bringing Bran and a host of Starks, Umber, Manderly, Glover, and more. Arya threw herself into preparations, scouring every corner of the rock, ordering new banners woven, kitchens doubled in staff, the great hall decked in both lion and direwolf. When Sansa's train arrived, it was a procession fit for a queen. Banners flying, silver bells chiming, hundreds of men and women in furs and mail and velvet. Bran rode in a cart drawn by shaggy northern ponies, his eyes distant, half lost in thought. Arya ran to meet them, arms outstretched. There were tears and laughter, and long hours spent in the solar as Sansa and Arya caught up on news, hopes and worries. Bran spoke little, but when he did, his words struck deep. "This place has changed," he said, studying the ancient stones. "It remembers you now. It remembers the wolf." Arya felt the truth of it, and a kind of relief. She had made her mark after all. Sansa presided at the great feast, Arya at her side, the hall alive with song and stories. Bran watched from beneath a tangle of firs, a quiet anchor to their gathering. The fosterlings performed for the court, showing off archery and riding, the children of the rock and the north mingling freely. That night, as the fires burned low, Arya found herself again on the ramparts, Sansa beside her. "Do you ever regret it?" Sansa asked. "Taking the rock for your own?" Arya looked out over the moonlit sea, the city spread below, the fields beyond. "No, I was never meant for the quiet life, Sansa. I made this place my home because I had to. Because I could. Maybe that's all any of us can do." Sansa nodded, her face soft in the silver light. "You've done more than most. The West is strong because of you. The North is safe because we're not alone." "Nemtsiu." Arya felt the knot in her chest loosen, just a little. "Will you stay?" she asked quietly. Sansa shook her head. "Not yet. My place is in Winterfell. But I will come again." When morning came, Arya saw her family off, watching the line of riders dwindle into the dawn. She stood a long while, heart torn between pride and longing, then turned back to her duties. The seasons turned. Arya ruled the rock through peace and hardship, through lean years and golden ones. She watched the children grow, taught them all she knew, judged wisely, led boldly. She never lost her edge, never let the lions grow their claws again. And every night, before she slept, Arya stood by her window, looking north to where the land vanished in mist and memory. She whispered the names of the dead, the lost, the loved, and she knew that though she walked far from Winterfell's Godswood, she carried its spirit with her, a wolf among lions, a Stark of the West, Lady of Casterly Rock, unbroken and unbowed, watching over all she had claimed and all she had made her own. Pa. In the heart of that long pale spring, with the wind restless and the sea forever murmuring below her windows, Arya Stark settled into her role as Lady of Casterly Rock in a way that startled even her. She did not grow soft, nor did she ever lose her edge. But there was a new steadiness to her movements. a kind of quiet certainty born from hardship and hard-won peace. The halls of the rock, once cold and echoing, pulsed now with the steady warmth of a living home. Fires banked against the stone, tapestries hung, children's voices echoing in chambers once filled only with the bitter laughter of Lannisters. Arya rose before dawn, as was her habit, and paced the western ramparts to greet the coming light. Her gaze traveled across the green fields and the golden city, all the way to the horizon where blue met blue, and the ships of the Rock's new navy sat at anchor. She could see the banners on their masts, lion and direwolf twined together. She felt a rush of something she could not name. Pride, maybe, or the strange ache of belonging. She let herself feel it only for a breath, then set her jaw and went to her duties. It was mid-morning by the time her council assembled. Gendry, broad-shouldered, his smith's hand scarred and steady. Maester Pylos, his chain heavy across his chest. Martin, shrewd-eyed and ever careful. Sir Harris, weathered as old stone and twice as stubborn. And now, too, young Lady Marianne Crakehull and timid Lord Lefford, fostered here and learning the work of rule. Arya led them through every task: rations for winter, repairs to the southern aqueduct, the training of new guards, the details of marriage alliances and trade with the Reach and the Riverlands. When the matter of justice arose, Arya listened. She called witnesses, weighed words and glances, recalled how it felt to be powerless. She saw to it that small folk and lords alike stood equal before her. And when she passed judgment, she did so with the clarity she'd once reserved for the edge of needle. No sentence was ever given lightly. One afternoon, as she sat in the open gallery writing letters, a commotion broke out below. Children's laughter, shrill and wild, echoing off the stone. Arya leaned over the balustrade to see the fosterlings at play, a blur of bright cloaks and tousled hair, chasing after a piebald pup with a wolf's sharp ears. The children had named her Sheer for the white slash over her eye. Arya smiled, a soft and secret thing, and let her thoughts drift to the old days in Winterfell, to Nymeria and the wild pack running the forests of the Neck. She wondered where her old wolf roamed, if she still remembered her girl. She was drawn from her reverie by footsteps. Gendry, shaking flour from his hands, having just escaped the kitchens. "They've got your wolf's look, those pups," he said, nodding at the children. Arya gave him a sidelong glance. "I could use a few more wolves in the rock. Lions get lazy without challenge." He laughed, the sound booming and easy. "You never did like easy." She nudged him with her shoulder. "Easy's for fools." As spring ripened, word reached the Rock of Unrest in the east. A clutch of mercenaries, remnants of the Golden Company, raiding farmsteads near the coast. Arya wasted no time. She donned plain leathers, took Gendry and a handful of loyal guards, and rode out at nightfall. The ride was hard and cold, the air thick with fog, but Arya felt alive with every hoofbeat. They tracked the sellswards to a ruined watchtower above a tangled wood. Arya slipped ahead in darkness, crawling through brambles, listening to the gruff voices and clink of stolen coin. She signaled her men, and they struck at dawn. A swift, bloody skirmish that ended with Arya's blade pressed to the captain's throat. "You ride for gold and glory," she told him. "But there's nothing here for you. Tell your company. The wolf rules the rock, and wolves do not share their kill." He spat at her feet, but yielded, his men slinking away like beaten dogs. Arya rode back in silence, the bite of the wind on her face sharpening her thoughts. She knew peace was never more than a pause between storms. But the small folk cheered her return, and the old men at the gates raised their mugs and called her name. A week later, word arrived from the north. Sansa had delivered a healthy son at Winterfell. Bran had seen omens of bountiful harvests in the dreams of the Weirwoods, and Jon had returned, at last, from beyond the wall, silent and changed, but alive. Arya read the letter thrice, heart swelling with relief and a longing that no power or title could ever ease. The next council day, she shared the news with her household. The halls erupted in celebration. Wine flowed, the kitchens outdid themselves, and Arya herself led the youngest fosterlings in a wild dance through the gallery. That night, she stood alone on the tower, looking north. the stars crisp above her, and whispered her thanks to the old gods. The months spun onward, as they always did. Arya oversaw the planting of orchards on the southern slopes and the repair of old aqueducts that carried mountain water to the city. She brought new smiths from the north, new healers from the Reach, and saw the harbor expanded, the first ship of the Rock's fleet built and launched, a broad-bellied vessel christened Wolf's Grace. She did not forget the old enemies lurking in the hills and among the shadows of the world. Her agents watched the Lannister cousins, tracked rumors of plot and vengeance. When she learned of a secret meeting in a ruined sept near Case, Arya went herself, slipping through the night with her face hidden, listening as 3 men swore bloody oaths to avenge their lost pride. She waited until they left, then sent her own message. A simple lock of lion gold hair tied with a thread of black. No more words were needed. The message was understood. In those long days, Arya kept her promise to herself, to walk among the people, to learn their faces and their stories. She helped a baker's daughter plant a garden behind the shops. She sat with the old widows in the upper city and listened to tales of Lannister's past. She rode with the guards on their nightly patrols, hearing the troubles of the valley folk and the secrets whispered in taverns. She grew to know every corner of her domain as well as she'd once known the forests and rivers of Winterfell. One market morning, Arya watched a crowd gather at the square. A troupe of mummers performed, a tale of the Lady Wolf, who had broken the lion's crown and brought peace to the west. Their Arya was tall and fierce, a sword at her hip, her laughter wild. Arya, disguised among the crowd, laughed along, savoring the joy and absurdity of seeing herself turn to legend before she was even old. That night Gendry found her at the forge, working at a blade of her own. "You'll dull your hands," he teased, but she only grinned, sweat on her brow. "I was always best at making things sharp," she said, holding the blade up to the light. He watched her, admiration in his eyes. "You're the sharpest thing here, Arya." When the summer came, Arya rode east to the borders, where the land turned rough and wild. She hunted with her guard, tracked outlaws in the broken hills, settled disputes between sheep herders and millers. She sat by the fire each night, trading stories, teaching the fosterlings to watch the woods, to trust their senses, to move silent as wolves. On her return, she found a letter waiting from Sansa. "The north flourishes. The boy is strong and stubborn. Jon is at peace. Bran dreams of summer snows. I wish you would come, even for a short while. The old gods would welcome you. You are remembered, always. Love, Sansa." Arya closed her eyes over the words. She yearned for home, for the smell of pine and snow, for the comfort of the godswood. But her heart was bound now to the fate of the West, to the people who called her lady. That autumn, Casterly Rock celebrated the harvest feast. The halls glittered with lanterns, the tables groaned with the yield of field and orchard. Arya walked among her guests, a motley crowd of lords and merchants, small folk and knights, children from every corner of her domain. She ate with them, drank with them, listened to their songs and troubles. When the night grew deep, Arya slipped out to the stables. She found Sheer curled in a pile of hay, pups wriggling at her belly. Arya stroked the mother's head, feeling the warmth of the tiny bodies, the pulse of life beneath her palm. Gendry joined her, arms full of apples from the feast. He leaned against the stall watching her. "You belong here," he said quietly. "You're not just their lady, you're their hope." Arya didn't answer, but her smile was real. The days shortened. The first snows dusted the fields and rooftops. Arya called her council and planned for winter, stockpiling grain, mending roofs, ensuring every child in the city had boots and a warm cloak. She sent the young fosterlings north to Winterfell for the season, wanting them to know the true winter of the world, to remember what it meant to be of the north. She spent more time in the city, walking the markets, visiting the sick, helping the healers in their work. She judged thieves and swindlers, pardoned a boy who'd stolen bread for his mother, exiled a merchant who cheated the gold miners of their wages. In the deep quiet of winter, Arya sat at her window, sewing a small rough direwolf to a new banner, lion and wolf side by side, not as conqueror and conquered, but as partners, as family. When it was finished, she hung it over the main gate, where all could see. On midwinter's night, the castle gathered in the great hall, fires roaring, the smell of roasting meat and spiced wine thick in the air. Arya stood at the high table, Gendry at her side, the people below cheering her name. She looked out at them. Miners, sailors, merchants, smiths, children, knights, and saw in their eyes not fear, nor suspicion, but hope. She raised her cup, voice ringing clear as the winter stars. You have given me your trust. You have given me your strength. I am Arya Stark, but I am of the rock now, as you are. May we keep what we have built, together, through winter, through storm, through every darkness. May the old gods and the new watch over us all. Benawan. The cheers thundered through the halls, and Arya felt, for the first time, a belonging that was not borrowed, not won by steel or blood, but given, day by day, by the people she had claimed as her own. As the flames danced in the hearths and laughter spilled out into the snowy courtyards, Arya slipped away to the quiet of her chamber, where Gendry waited and the gentle breath of sleep found her at last. She dreamed at night of a wolf running the golden fields, the wind in its fur, the world wide and wild and full of light. And when morning came, Arya Stark, Lady of Casterly Rock, woke ready for whatever storms the new day would bring. Heart steady, eyes bright, a wolf at peace among the lions. Kai. The winter deepened, hard and wild. Westerly gales battered the cliffs, stripping the trees on the heights to dark, bare bones and lashing foam high against the base of the rock. Each night, the sea boomed and the wind howled through the towers, finding every crack and seam, making the old stones groan. Arya stood many such nights at the highest window, wrapped in furs, the candle guttering behind her, eyes fixed on the storm-shaken horizon. The people of the rock said she did not fear the wild weather, that she rode out into the wind, let it whip her hair and redden her cheeks, that she laughed at the gale as if it were a brother come home from exile. There was truth in it. The wind was a Northman's song. Inside, the halls of Casterly Rock blazed with light and heat. Arya would not have her people cold. She sent men to chop and haul wood through sleet and ice, saw to the repair of windows and walls, and made sure every hearth in city and castle was lit from the great fire in her own hall. Food, too, was watched with a wolf's vigilance. She walked the stores with Martin and the bakers, tasting the flour, measuring casks of dried fish and honey, ordering salt beef and cheese be sent to every family whose cellars ran thin. No one went hungry, not this winter. It was in such a mood of vigilant strength that word came of trouble at the far edge of her domain. The villages on the border of Harrenhal lands, where the valleys narrowed and the woods grew thick, had sent up cries for help. Cattle stolen, hunters vanishing, a darkness in the forest that even the old men feared. The tales were wild, wolves bigger than horses, shadows with burning eyes, ancient spirits awoken. Arya was not one for ghost stories, but she listened to every telling, every trembling voice. She summoned her council at dusk, a fire burning low between them. "We should send soldiers," said Sir Harris, voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Hunt whatever beast haunts those woods." "Or men," said Maester Pylus, steepling his fingers. "Bandits, perhaps, taking shelter in winter's dark." Arya turned to Gendry. "You know the land. What do you think?" Gendry rubbed his chin. "The woods there are old, hard country. Could be anything, wolves, aye, but no wolves as big as the tales say. Could be poachers. Desperate men do desperate things in the cold." Arya nodded, considering. "I'll go. With a small party. Quiet. If it's a ghost, I'll talk to it. If it's men, I'll find them. If it's a monster..." She shrugged. "I'll see what monsters look like up close." The council grumbled and protested, but Arya would not be moved. By dawn she'd gathered her pack. Gendry, Sir Harris, two of her best archers, and young Marianne Crakehall, eager and bright-eyed, determined to prove herself worthy of the fosterage Arya had given her. They dressed in furs and boiled leather, took bows and axes, and rode out as the first gray light touched the snow-drifted roads. The journey west took 3 days, winding through frozen valleys and narrow mountain passes, past small holdings huddled against the wind. Everywhere they stopped, Arya listened. Old women's prayers, shepherd boys' shouts, the uneasy silence of empty farmsteads. Each village spoke of the same dread. Something hunted them from the trees. Wolves, yes, but not wolves as the world knew them. Wolves that stood on 2 legs, that spoke in dreams, that left no tracks in the snow. The last village clung to a hill above the river. The people there met Arya with awe, half hoping, half fearing the Lady Wolf would bring the storms with her. She slept in the inn's common room, listening to the wind and the old walls creak. Marianne curled beside her, too proud to admit her nerves. But Arya heard the girl's quickened breath when the wolves howled at midnight. At dawn they entered the forest. The trees closed around them, pine and black oak, so old their trunks were split with age. It was dark and silent beneath the branches. The party moved slowly, eyes and ears open, boots sinking into the thick, clean snow. Gendry ranged ahead, silent as a shadow, his hand never straying far from his sword. Arya tracked beside him, every sense sharp. They found the first signs within an hour: a deer carcass, torn open, not eaten. Bloody paw prints, huge and misshapen, circling in the snow. Arya bent close, touched the tracks. She knew wolf sign, knew too the tricks of men who wished to frighten. But these prints, she could not place them. She pressed on. Deeper in the woods, the light dwindled to blue shadow. Sir Harris muttered prayers to the Seven. Marianne tried to keep her chin high, but Arya saw her flinch at every bird call. As dusk fell, they found the ruins of a camp. Fire long cold, bones scattered, the stench of fear in the air. Arya crouched beside the ashes, picking up a scorched scrap of cloth. Crimson and gold, Lannister colors. She showed it to Gendry. Refugees from the old wars? Bandits? He shook his head. Or Lannister kin, hiding from your justice. Arya stood, voice low. Either way, we'll find them. That night, they made camp in a ring of stones, the fire small and shielded. Arya stood first watch, listening to the woods, every creak and sigh of snow. It was near midnight when she heard it, a long, mournful howl, far too close. She rose, hand on needle, scanning the darkness. A shape moved between the trees. Swift and silent. A wolf, black as midnight, eyes gold and fierce, far larger than any hound, lean as famine. For a heartbeat, Arya's heart leapt. Nymeria. But no, the gate was wrong, the hunger not hers. The wolf circled the camp, never coming close to the fire, always just at the edge of sight. Arya let it be, watching as it melted into the dark. By morning, the snow was trampled in a wide circle. Their horses were restless, nostrils flaring, ears back. They broke camp and pressed on. By noon, they reached the heart of the forest, a hollow thick with mist. There, among the ancient stones, they found a band of men huddled around a smoky fire. Half wore Lannister red, ragged and faded. The rest were wild, desperate, faces drawn with hunger. Arya strode into their midst, bold as a knight. "You're trespassing in my lands," she called. "You've frightened my people, hunted my deer. Why?" The leader, an older man with a gray beard and a deep scar across his brow, stood. "We're not here by choice, my lady. We fled Red Lake last year. Tyrell men took our land. We tried to buy food, but your folk would not sell. So we hunted. We meant no harm." Arya saw the fear in their faces. Desperate men, not monsters. "But the wolves," the man said, voice low. "They follow us, every night. We lose men, one by one. They don't eat them, just drag them away." Arya's blood ran cold. "You're sure it's wolves?" He nodded. "Or something like." Arya considered. "Pack your things. I'll lead you out of the forest. You'll work for your bread in the city, help with the spring planting. Steal again, and I'll send you north in chains." The man agreed, relief flooding his eyes. But as they turned to go, Marianne shrieked. A shadow lunged from the trees, huge and black, all teeth and rage. Gendry threw himself at Arya, knocking her aside as the wolf struck. It bowled over one of the Lannister men, tearing him down before vanishing again into the gloom. Chaos. Swords flashed. Men shouted. The archers loosed arrows into the mist. Arya stood at the center, calm amid the panic, tracking every motion. She heard another howl, closer, angrier. She called out, strong and clear. Hold. Make for the clearing. Move. Men saw. They fled as a pack, the men gathering close. Arya and Gendry flanking the rear, Marianne leading the archers. Another wolf circled, gray this time, not as large, but hungry-eyed. Arya raised her bow and loosed, the arrow striking true. The beast yelped and vanished. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, the sun was dying in a blood-red sky. No more wolves chased them. Arya saw the survivors, frightened, battered, alive. They camped at the first farmstead, the villagers wary but welcoming, especially when Arya vouched for the newcomers. She sat by the fire, warming her hands, the memory of the black wolf's eyes haunting her. It's not natural, Gendry murmured beside her. Wolves that size, that many. Arya stared into the flames. Winter is always hungry. Sometimes it comes with teeth. Men shall. When they returned to the rock, Arya saw that word of her deed had spread already. The people cheered her as wolf slayer, as peacemaker, as lady who braved the haunted woods. She met every gaze levelly, knowing how quickly legend became truth in hungry times. But privately, she wrote to Bran, asking for his wisdom. Brother, there are wolves in the west, unlike any I have known. Shadows, and a hunger that does not fade. If you can, send word. Is it old magic, or just winter's cruelty? Bran's reply was slow to come, but when it did, it was short and certain. Wolves come to those who remember. You are not alone, Arya. Treat them with respect. If you see the shadow again, do not fear. Not all wolves are meant to be tamed. She folded the letter, storing it in her chest. Afterward, whenever Arya walked the fields or rode the woods, she kept watch for the black wolf. Sometimes, in the deep cold before dawn, she glimpsed it at the edge of the city, or heard its howl in the high passes. But it never drew near, nor did it trouble the villages again. Winter passed slowly. The days were cold and short, but there was no famine, no great sickness. Arya's people endured, and so did she. Gendry worked late at the forge, making new plows and stronger tools. Marianne Crakehall grew from girl to woman, learning from Arya not just how to fight, but how to listen, how to weigh a lie from a truth, how to bear the loneliness that came with leadership. On the first true day of spring, the people of the rock gathered for the feast. Arya walked among them, pausing to watch the children dance, to listen to the old men sing, to taste the honey cakes baked from the last of the winter stores. She wore a new cloak, gray wool lined with gold, and carried no sword, only the small sharp knife Gendry had forged for her years before. When dusk fell, Arya stood before her people in the great square. She spoke simply, voice carrying over the sea wind. We have seen hard days, and we will see more, but we face them together. As wolves, as lions, as people who will not be broken. A roar rose from the crowd, honest and full. That night, in her chamber, Arya wrote a final letter to Sansa. The wolves are gone. The fields are green. I have found my place at last. You would laugh to see me, sister. As father. Stubborn as mother, sharp as the wind, but I am well, and so are the people who call me lady. The West is home. She signed her name, sealed the letter, and set it aside. She drifted to sleep as the moon rose, the sea whispering below, dreaming not of ghosts but of golden fields and running wolves. When morning came, Arya Stark woke with the dawn, Lady of Casterly Rock, and the West belonged to her as surely as any place had ever belonged to a Stark. Kai. Unusual activity has been detected from your device. Try again later. 9440 TFDDDD Dwakford 72 would be ein. The slow, sweet thaw of spring crept up the valleys and across the golden city, loosening ice from the eaves and painting every bare branch with new green. Arya felt the change like a loosening of old armor. She walked the morning ramparts in a thinner cloak, breathing the salt-rich air and listening to the city rouse itself beneath her. Merchants shouting, children racing through the lanes, the clatter and whir of the rock's many forges. Each morning, the horizon was a deeper blue, the promise of summer whispered by every breeze. The past winter had forged her people into something new. They walked taller, smiled more quickly, spoke with a confidence she recognized from her own blood. Arya saw it in the way the small folk greeted her, no longer with the fearful awe of strangers, but with the nods and easy jests one gives a familiar neighbor. The banners of the lion and the wolf, now joined in every public square, in every great hall, no longer seemed a curiosity but a fact as natural as sunrise. Some days she scarcely remembered the world as it had been before. Arya's days unfolded in measured, steady rhythm. She sat at council each dawn, listening to reports of crops planted and ships outfitted, of marriages arranged, of trade with the north and the riverlands. Lady Marianne Crakehall, once a shy, gawky girl, now held her seat with quiet assurance, eyes keen and hands steady. Arya saw in her an echo of her younger self, sharp, determined, unwilling to yield. Lord Lefford had grown into a steady steward, his confidence flowering under Arya's tutelage. Even Gendry had changed. Still the smith. Still stubborn. But there was a gravity to him now. The unmistakable weight of someone who belonged. As spring's warmth grew, Arya made good on her promise to Sansa. She would visit Winterfell before the harvest, if only for a fortnight, trusting her council to manage the rock in her absence. There was a feast before she departed, a night of wild music and laughter that spilled into the courtyards and the city below. The people cheered as Arya rode out through the Golden Gate, Gendry and Marianne at her side, a small retinue of her best guards following. The road north was kinder than it had been in years. The snows had melted from the high passes. Wildflowers crowded every verge. Arya rode at the head of her column, often silent, watching hawks wheel above the fields, thinking of how far she had come, from child to killer, from wolf to lady. At the crossings of the Trident, fishermen hailed her as the Lady Wolf, offering her sweet wine and tales of the mild winter. In the Riverlands, banners of Tully, Manderley, and Tallheart greeted her progress. It was nearly summer by the time the gray walls of Winterfell rose from the mist, crowned by crows and ringed with green. Sansa was waiting in the Godswood, her hair braided with pale blue flowers, Bran beside her in his wheeled chair, his gaze distant and deep as a weirwood pool. Arya dismounted, boots sinking in the soft earth, and let Sansa pull her into a fierce embrace. "You look older," Sansa teased, laughing through tears. "But not so old as me." Arya grinned, feeling young and ancient at once. She bent to Bran, clasped his cold hand. "Did you see me coming?" she asked. Bran smiled that slow, knowing smile. "I always do." There were days of peace then, a kind Arya had forgotten. She sparred with the Winterfell guards in the yard, besting even the proudest knights. She rode with Sansa to the edge of the Wolfswood, watched the new wheat sway under a northern sky, sat long hours with Bran beneath the heart tree. The quiet settled into her bones. Each evening, she broke bread with her siblings, listening to stories of the North. The rebuilding, the births, the battles averted by wise words instead of sharp steel. Jon arrived near midsummer, grim and gentle, hair shot with new gray, a wolfish smile hidden beneath his beard. Arya threw her arms around him, holding tight, remembering the brother who had once given her needle and every hope that had carried her south. "You're a legend in the West," Jon said one night as they sat on the battlements. "They say you rule like a Stark, but fight like a Lannister, and have the luck of a Frey who's never crossed a river." Arya snorted. "I've had enough of legends. I want peace for a while." He looked at her with quiet pride. "You've earned it, but the world always changes. Be ready." Arya took his words to heart. Before leaving Winterfell, she sat with Sansa one last time, hands twined over a jug of mead, the fire painting their faces gold. "Do you ever wish you'd never left?" Arya asked. Sansa shook her head. "No. I wish things had been easier for us, but I'd not trade what I've learned. You belong in the West, Arya. You make them better, and they've made you something new." Arya nodded, swallowing the ache that always came with parting. "I'll come back. I promise." She left at dawn, the mists still clinging to the land, Bran and Sansa and Jon watching from the gate. The journey home was swift. Her escort was leaner, for the roads were safe. By midsummer, Casterly Rock was a riot of color. Banners snapping in the sun, markets spilling into the streets, ships crowding the harbor. There was work waiting, always. Arya read every letter, judged every quarrel. She sent grain to a flooded village, commissioned a new bell tower for Lannisport's sept, held council with the heads of the mines and the shipwrights. She called for a tourney to celebrate peace. Nothing grand, but enough to let every child dream of victory. It was at this tourney that a shadow from the past returned. Late in the day, as the melee finished and the sun dropped red behind the rock, a rider appeared at the gates, cloaked and hooded, bearing a battered shield marked with the sigil of House Clegane. The guards led him before Arya. He dropped his hood, revealing a face marked by scars, gray at the temples, but eyes still fierce. Sandor Clegane, the Hound, alive after all these years. There was a hush in the court. Arya stepped forward, her voice quiet but unyielding. "You're far from home, Sandor." He grunted. "No home left, girl. Heard the West had a Stark for lady. Figured I'd see if you were as fierce as they say." "Then no wonder." She offered him bread and salt. "You'll eat, then tell your story." The Hound ate with the appetite of a starving wolf, tearing into roast and bread, drinking deep from a mug of red. When he was sated, he spoke of years wandering, of war in the Riverlands, of bandits and broken men, of long, lonely roads. "You looking for service?" Arya asked at last. He shrugged. Maybe just tired of running." Arya considered. "You'll have a place here, if you can stomach peace." Sandor barked a laugh. "Peace is what you make it, girl." She smiled. "Then make it with us." The Hound stayed. He trained squires, rode patrol with the city watch, drank with Gendry in the evenings. He and Arya sparred often, each finding in the other a steel that never dulled. The children idolized him, and the miners learned to trust a man who could break a boulder with one fist. The year turned, and with it, Casterly Rock grew into its promise. The Navy patrolled the coast, pirates held at bay. The new aqueduct ran clear water down from the hills. The fosterlings who had grown under Arya's rule began to take on their own duties, judging disputes, leading men, holding the peace. One autumn evening, Arya rode to the highest bluff with Gendry and Marianne, the Hound following behind, grumbling about his knees. They looked out over the fields, gold and green, dotted with sheep and cattle, the city lights beginning to glow below. The sun was a red coin slipping into the sea. "We built this," Marianne said softly. "It will last." Arya squeezed her shoulder. "Only if we keep earning it." Gendry looked at her, his eyes full of the future. "What now, Lady Stark?" She smiled, fierce and full. "Now we live. Now we teach them to hold what we've made." The days shortened, the nights grew cool, but the West did not forget its wolf. Arya ruled with a quiet certainty, teaching the next generation to be strong, fair, and kind. The Hound taught them to fight and to laugh at fear. Gendry built the best forge the Rock had ever known, and Marianne, no longer timid, was the first of many girls to be knighted in her name. At the first frost, Arya received a letter from Sansa. News of a new Stark child. A girl with Arya's wild hair and Jon's eyes. Arya read it by firelight, a smile breaking across her face. She wrote back, promising to visit when the roads cleared, telling Sansa all that had happened, how the West had grown strong, how a family could be made from loyalty and choice. One night, alone on the ramparts, Arya watched the moon ride high above the roaring sea. A black wolf padded into the torchlight, silent as a shadow, then melted away before she could reach out. Arya closed her eyes, listening to the waves in the wind, feeling the fierce peace she'd won. She was Arya Stark, Lady of Casterly Rock, wolf among lions, hope of the West. And as the dawn broke golden over her city, she knew she had not only found her place, but had forged it, every day, with the sharp edge of her will and the steady, stubborn strength of her heart.